Hello everyone, and welcome to the Retaining Successful Chemical and Downstream CAPEX project delivery through unprecedented times. I am Bridget Robinson, Project Director at Petrochemical Update, and today's organizer. As some of you already may know, I'm one of the conference directors for Downstream 2020, which this webinar is being released in connection to. Before we kick off, I just wanted to say from our team to yours, I hope that you are all doing okay in these crazy times and sometimes scary times, and that you and your families are keeping safe and sound and sane during the global lockdown. The current unprecedented combination of the global pandemic and the oil price crash is leading to a reconfiguration of the downstream sector's status quo. Whilst full ramifications of this remains unclear, Reuters Events wants to start to unpick what the consequences could be for downstream CAPEX industries with some of our most renowned industry partners. In today's webinar, we will attempt to answer some of the industry's burning questions regarding maintaining safety, contractual implications, new construction innovations born out of this new environment, and the effects of global supply chain delays on your project. Just a brief bit of housekeeping before we start. This webinar will last approximately 50 to 60 minutes and is being recorded, so we will send you the full audio next week in case you wanted to listen again. Please do ask any questions as and when they pop up. Simply send them through the questions box on your screen. Our panelists will answer your questions at the end of the webinar, where we have allotted around 15 minutes or so for an audience Q&A. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists today. First up, we have Greg Sizemore, who is the Executive Vice President of the Construction User Roundtable. Mr. Sizemore has over 20 years in construction industry and associated management experience. Immediately out of graduate school, he served for 3 years as a Director of Labour Relations at the Associated General Contractors and Allied Construction Industries in Cincinnati, Ohio. For 18 years, Mr. Sizemore was the Executive Director at the Construction Owner Association at the Tri-State in Cincinnati, Ohio, and is recognized as one of the leading local user councils in the county. In 1989, Mr. Sizemore started Sizemore & Company, a construction industry association management and consulting firm. Some of Sizemore & Company's other client organizations include Coates, the Georgia Construction and Maintenance Council, the Appalachian Construction User Council, and additionally, Mr. Sizemore serves on various industry and civic boards, including the University of Cincinnati Industrial Advisory Council, the Advisory Committee to the Albany Technical College, and the West Virginia Construction Coalition Conference. Mr. Sizemore also teaches construction law and workforce development classes as an adjacent professor in the University of Cincinnati. He is also a frequent guest speaker at industry events where he represents the voice of the owner in the construction industry. So Mr. Sizemore holds a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in industrial labor relations from the University of Cincinnati. He earned his law degree from North Kentucky University College of Law and is a licensed attorney in the state of Ohio. Next up, we have John Hewitt, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer at Matrix Service Company, a top-tier North American industrial engineering and construction company serving the energy markets. With a genuine passion for the industry, Matrix and its employees, John has spent his entire career of more than 40 years in engineering, procurement, and construction industry. His roles have included tradesman, field and project manager, managerial and executive positions. He is unrelenting when it comes to driving his company's culture and core values, which include safety, integrity, stewardship, positive relationships, community involvement, and delivering the best. Before joining Matrix in 2011, John served in managerial and executive positions for various engineering and construction operation businesses and businesses of Acre Solutions, which ASA and its predecessor companies. John earned his bachelor's in business administration degree in finance from Stetson University and a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from Florida Institute of Technology. He has been a member of the Construction Industry Institute since the mid-1990s and has served on various research and standing committees. He is currently a member of the CII's Strategic Planning Committee and was recently appointed as the trustee of Florida Institute of Technology. He serves on various charitable boards in Tulsa, Oklahoma regions, including United Way, Tulsa Boys Home, and Philbrick Museum. Also, we were supposed to have Jan from Eastman Chemical Company, who is the Worldwide Engineering and Construction Service Solutions, who is the director of the Worldwide Engineering and Construction Services and Solutions. But unfortunately, due to a last-minute scheduling conflict, she wasn't able to join us today. But safe to say, I think we can all agree we're in fantastic hands today. So without further ado, how are you guys doing? Greg, John?
We're doing splendidly. This is Greg Sizemore, doing splendidly as we try to get in front of the wave and anticipate changes that will be permanent, changes that will be temporary, and changes that will be, I think, revolutionary in the terms of the way we do business on our site and in our office. John?
This is John Hewitt. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I think I would echo Greg's comments there. I think we're, as an organization, we're creating some new business habits around working remotely, about communication techniques, so it's even though these are some trying times for the industry and for the economy and for people globally, I think that we're, there's a lot of opportunity in the things that we're doing in these habits that we're creating that's going to make our company and our industry better.
Sure. Great. Well, I suppose without further ado, I'm going to kick off with some questions if that's all right. Sure. So I suppose the first one that I want to talk about is safety. So John, in terms of the current climate that we're in, how has safety changed in your opinion on site?
Well, I mean, safety on our job sites, whether they're maintenance operations, turnarounds, large capital projects, it's a continual challenge for our site teams and leadership and our employees to continue to drive, for great safety performance, to drive for improvement, and so that's it's a daily effort to achieve the kind of performance that we're looking for, and then you pile on top of that, the issues related to the pandemic and how our site teams now have to, and our clients have to deal with those issues, the additional protocols and procedures that they need to add into, their daily work practices, to training, site access, how people are working together. So it creates even more complexity for our site teams to have to deal with. But I'd be for our folks, totally proud of our folks and their ability to absorb all these changes and the guidelines and the things that they now have to do to keep our employees healthy and safe. Have done a really good job with that.
If I could weigh in also, Bridget, I think, and again, my organization, the Construction Users Roundtable, represents the voice of the owner, primarily the industrial owner in our membership. And I think when it comes to safety, there are several aspects that at least folks on your call probably need to be aware of. The first is safety on the job site, as John eloquently shared, and his company is doing fantastic with respect to adaptation there. But we're not only protecting our workers and our people, but we're protecting them from others, and we're protecting them for others. That's an added layer of complexity that perhaps we didn't have before. I would also encourage, as a little golden nugget, each of your listeners to work closely with your legal counsel, whether in-house or outsourced. And the reason is that I think OSHA has already begun to take a significant step to intrude in how we function on our projects. I think there's going to be regulatory compliance issues. There's going to be regulatory breaches that need to be dealt with. Those need to be closely monitored to make sure we're taking reasonable care to meet the standards that are ever evolving, that are very fluid at this point with respect to OSHA. I dare say that in years past, when we talked about the impact of pandemic on our sites, we probably didn't give it much thought. Now, having seen the conflagration that's a result of government action and project shutdowns, it's really elevated the or the need for crisis management teams in our organization. Heretofore, we've kind of deferred to, okay, how do you get the plant up and running if we had a hurricane, a tornado, or a fire and those sorts of things, but we never dealt with pandemic issues which were outside the gates of the project. What do we do to protect the families of our workers, the community? How do we communicate when everybody's been sent home? So suddenly our scope of concern and responsibility merges or oozes out of the confines of the project or from the C-suite offices of owners and contractors into a broader responsibility for community, a broader responsibility for family, an increase compliance requirement from the federal government, and no doubt some HR issues are going to rise from this. When do you send people home? For how long? How do you communicate? How do you know they're back? And then we also have the added cost of these temperature machines and personal protective equipment and gloves, and we're putting more and more on our foremen and superintendents to monitor on job site interaction. These are huge issues that we've had very little experience with in the past, but that we're going to have a very profound impact on safety in the future. So the golden nugget takeaway is work with legal counsel, work with your HR teams, understand what regulatory compliance issues are, understand what leading practices are when it comes to implementation of tools or processes. John has been steeped in a kissing cousin organization of ours. We work very closely with the Construction Industry Institute, CII, out of Austin, Texas, an amazingly good organization with world-class research. And I dare say that in the future, some of the research topics will emerge from experiences in this pandemic. So we now have more responsibility than we ever have had for more folks than we've ever had to be concerned with. John, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, so our experience through all this stuff is, the construction, folks, ours and was in the industry are pretty innovative folks. And so, we give them the kind of the roadmap and the guidelines, and they can figure out how to make it work, right? So how to keep social distancing going on the job sites, how to keep people separated, how to take break areas and lunch areas and expand those and make those safer for people to get into. How do we get people in and out of the job sites and without them having to touch a bunch of things and create hygiene and wash stations and then working closely with our clients on whether we modify schedules to keep the total workforce down on the job sites to make social distancing easier and better to do, and then and monitor our employees, communicating with them often about the importance of following these guidelines, things that are important for them to do. If you're sick, let us know. We've had some projects where we've had a person call in and say, hey, I've got a fever, not feeling well, I'm going to get tested. We'll do contact tracing to make sure we appreciate all the people that person might have come into contact with. We'll take that group of people, take them off site for 14 days, either waiting for a test to come back from the affected employee or positive or negative. So I think, all those solutions, all those issues have solutions. And I think, again, it's communication. It's given our project teams an opportunity to respond to the challenges, provide a roadmap for them on the things that they got to do.
Sure,
John,
sure.
I think there's Bridget, may I add another point that I think is extremely important? And that is, I think that one issue has been highlighted and probably amped up from the bottom of the list toward the top, and that is the mental health of our workers. In addition to job loss, in addition to disease, in addition to the deaths, whether of friends or folks in the community, and that number, thank the good Lord, is not real high. Any is unacceptable, but the suicide issue in the construction industry has recently come to light as a major issue. We highlighted it in our conference just before this broke in the United States back in February, and it is one of the most prone industries to mental health issues and then unfortunately, suicide. And obviously, what's happened in the last 6-8 weeks has been an added burden on those who might be predisposed to mental health issues or, God forbid, suicide on here. So I think that that's going to take a more prominent role. Mental health, not suicide particularly, but certainly mental health as we go forward. And we're going to have our HR teams, as well as some of those folks on the project, superintendents, foremen, general foremen, et cetera, just be more educated and aware of ticks and tells that may indicate there's a mental health issue going on. And then obviously providing some assistance. So I want to bring that point to light. I think that issue is going to be exacerbated. The data is not in yet. Obviously, we're fluid in this, but I think it's going to show that there's going to be an uptick in problems on job sites because of that. So we need to each be aware of the role mental health plays as well as physical health.
Yeah, one of the things I'd add to that is just, so that, as Greg's talking about, that's, the mental health issues certainly related to overall stress on the workforce,
right.
Both what's happening at work and home, especially when you get a number of our craftspeople and our site staff, travel for projects, is focus. And so, the safety, right now we're talking about safety, and one of the key elements of having a good safe performance on a project is focus. Each and every individual is focused on their task. They're focused on doing the right thing, making the right decisions as they go through their daily tasks. And now you heap this on top of it. So the added challenge for everybody on the job site, particularly the site leadership, is to help people maintain focus on their tasks. And so that, we're protecting them from a pandemic, but we've shifted their focus so far away from their work tasks at hand that now it's impacting their ability to do their tasks safely. And so it's all about managing that stress on the job site.
Bridget, John made a good point a minute ago, and I want to highlight something he said, if I may, and that is this. These issues have a solution, and he's exactly right. Here's the good news. We will adapt to this new normal, much like we did post the 2008 meltdown and the 2011 attacks. This pandemic, we will adapt. And I'm very happy to say that CII, along with the Construction Users Roundtable, are working together to explore and get out in front of resources that owners, contractors, subcontractors, and even labor need to have in order to be effective in their jobs. Not only effective, but efficient. And not only effective and efficient, but safe. So organizations like the various trade associations, CURT, CII, I think we're going to have to amp up our game when it comes to developing these crisis teams and guidelines and resources for owners and contractors and subs to go to learn how to comply with these challenges. So I really want to applaud CII, our own group CURT, as well as the AGC and ABC and even the organized trades for working together to get in front of this so we can come up with solutions and carry on. I'm totally confident we will.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to, I suppose, touch on something you said, John, is, ensuring that we keep focus on safety. And I know that you guys are very hot as an organization on safety, but how do you maintain that focus on safety when everyone is and everyone in themselves and their also their job functions is already kind of stressed to the limit?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit depends on what the project is, but in general, I think it's, like anything in life, is try and maintain some kind of normalcy. These are just some of the things from hygiene and social distancing, and some of those things are just things that we have to do. So continual communication to our workforce, providing the guidelines that, the jobs are going to be executed under, continuing to make sure leadership is out on the job site, both from safety professionals and from the operating professionals, and continual communication to the employees, and making sure, we maintain some calmness on our job sites, that we're not in a panic, that these are things that we can do, we can execute, They can be part of your daily routine, and make them part of the daily routine so that you can maintain that focus.
Definitely. It's kind of all about that accountability, continued training and continuous engagement with those guidelines. I'd like to move on to the next theme, actually, regarding the kind of contractual implications that companies are experiencing, but also should be looking for. So what would you say are the kind of main things that companies should kind of start preparing for, or should be looking out for? And I'll put that to you first, Greg.
Well, I'm going to start at a 10,000-foot level, and I think the first thing is, the use of force majeure is going to change the law and how that's implemented and what constitutes. Is this an act of God? Is this something else? Are pandemics going to be included? And these kinds of extreme global issues, and I think they will. I think contracts will change in the way that they're written. I think that contract exclusions at times, insurance is huge. Insurance industry is already looking at, how do we assure that that we're not liable for loss? And I think you're going to see a more strict insurance guideline that perhaps excludes things like these pandemics. As I mentioned, the use of the force majeure clause, and there's another contractual feature. And that is the HR component. What do we do with this workforce? How do we send them home? For how long? Neither John nor I are physicians. Who's allowed to bring them back, and says who? And I think that oftentimes you're going to see the requirement of these crisis plans, these job site coronavirus-like response plans that are prepared in writing and assign a plan coordinator and identify senior management and site personnel who have to operationalize or implement the plan. And how do you train workers, and how do you communicate? And all this has to do not only with contracts, but also tort. What is reasonable care? Did you know, or should you have known, that this was reasonably likely to occur? Did you know, or should you have known that COVID-19 was somehow present on your job site? And what's the reasonable person test? What's the reasonable standard of care that we should take in order to respond to it? And I think that's why it's important that organizations like CI and CURT and the trade associations work together to establish leading practices. Maybe not best practices. Who knows what best is? But obviously there's a leading practice that becomes an industry standard. So it's really important that we, the industry, speaking royally, we, the industry, self-govern and provide some guidelines and inputs, to the courts, frankly, for what leading practice is and what reasonable care looks like and what these plans require. But I think the biggest earthquake is going to happen in these force majeure clauses. John, any comment?
Yeah, so we're living in, for us, we're living in real time right now.
Right.
And so we've, I think we've been very fortunate, that our clients we've been working with have been trying to find solutions to keep their project going or to minimize the potential impact from the pandemic. All of our contracts have force majeure clauses in them, or at least a majority of them do. We've been exercising those clauses, or our clients have, not been pushing back on that. They get it, they appreciate it. I'm sure they, a lot of the facilities and projects that we're building, they've got offtake agreements where they have force majeure clauses in them. So I would say in this time, we've had a very, very good working relationship with our clients, because I think all of us are sort of in the same boat here. And so that's sort of the ongoing thing. And then so the new things that we're working on and negotiating now, we're finding a lot more dialogue around the force majeure language within those contracts, and how, because it isn't, the history there isn't always a specific language carved out or part of a force majeure contract, the force majeure clause that relates to pandemic issues. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. So I think we're finding a lot more dialogue between our clients and our legal teams about how to deal with that issue within a force majeure clause.
Yeah, let me add to that also again, John. That's very wise and astute. And I want to emphasize this to your listeners, Bridget, is I think the key thing, and you've heard John say it over and over, and myself, communicate, up and down, vertically, horizontally, obviously to the project team, and your on-site management, internally among the C-suite stakeholders and outside counsel, but also with your customers. I don't think anybody wants to go to court over how we've handled this, because it's a lose-lose-lose if we do. And it's a risk if we do. And I think that what I'm seeing, at least among the owners, as John has indicated, that there's at least a spirit of willingness and cooperation to do the right thing and to do the fair thing. Will there be exceptions? Of course there will be exceptions. But the smart money is on communicating with your subcontractors, your contractors, owners with the contractors, and contractors with the owners, and begin that dialogue early. And sure, you're going to include the lawyers, but frankly, and I am one, I think that we've got to coach those lawyers. This is not about a tug of war. This is not about a win-lose proposition. This is how does the industry come together to assure projects are delivered on time, on budget, with quality assurances and at a fair price. That's the key. And I think good communication, as John has so wisely mentioned in his organization, is absolutely key to avoiding conflict and misunderstanding and litigation in the future. The second thing I think I've heard some talk about, at least among the owner community, is because we're going to have to amp up our game and our communication standards, the whole concept of integrated project delivery, where you have all the stakeholders at the table at the same time, developing fair contracts with fairly allocated risk. And there's always debate about that. Debate's good. But I think you're going to see perhaps an emergence, a little uptick in the use of integrated project delivery as a result. Communication is absolutely essential to avoiding unintended consequences of litigation later on. And obviously that is the essence of integrated project delivery, consensus docs, integrated forms of agreement. So perhaps this is the catalyst to springboard us even further into a more sane contractual process.
Yeah, you raised a really good point there, Greg, and it leads very nicely on to our next question, actually, is, we were already kind of going through a change in terms of contract strategy to drive productivity on site. We were kind of going towards various strategies, for example, lump sums, etc. But how do you think this environment will change contract strategies going forward in terms of, as you said, that relationship between the owner operators and the contractors? And I suppose you were already kind of talking about it, Greg, so I'd love to kind of hear your further thoughts on that. And then John, I'd love to hear from you from a kind of a contractor perspective as well.
Well, I think what it's going to do is at least highlight the need for what does improved communication look like? What does fair risk allocation look like? How do we integrate the needs of the various stakeholders? How do we allocate fairly among the stakeholders? And there's various forms of this underway, and I think it's going to highlight it. Is it going to cause a seismic shift to those contract strategies? I don't know. But I think what it does is highlight the need for it. It's certainly going to be a part of the narrative moving forward. But this is really for me, I think it's too early to tell, Bridget. I'm just keeping my ear to the ground on the owner community, and we've got meetings next week. They're going to be virtual. They were supposed to be in Cincinnati. They're not. We're going to meet virtually. And that'll be one of the things that we discuss is, issues like this and changes that occur. John?
Yeah, it's been, for, I don't know how many years in the Construction Industry Institute, there's been a lot of research done around, a much more enlightened approach with contracting between owners and contractors, and how you allocate the risk, who's best suited to control that risk, and for one or the other to push risks that they really can't mitigate, risks that they really can't deal with, onto one of those partners. And this is probably certainly the pandemic thing, like Greg said, is it can be an owner-opening event. It could be whether it's a complete groundbreaking shift or not. That's yet to be seen. But I think the owner contractor community has to work through what needs to be really a generational shift in how we allocate risk on our projects and who's best able to control that risk. and what the outcome of the inability of the contractor or the owner to be able to manage those risks that come onto the job. So those things are topics that are continually in discussion, and frankly, it's so when the times get bad, when times get rough, when work is down, sometimes there are some owners that take advantage of that situation because you figure contractors are hungry and they'll sign anything. And then when times are really, really good and there's a lot of owners that need to get their plants and their facilities built, contractors take advantage of them, and we push risk on them. So it cuts both ways, and I think we've got to find a more level playing field, I think, between both parties.
The one thing, and that's a great response, John. I think the one thing that this pandemic does, unlike other issues and unexpected eventualities, is that it has affected everyone. I mean, the owner didn't get, he's not excluded, the contractor's not excluded, the workers aren't excluded. Everybody is impacted by this. And so when you have these negative impacts, it drives behavior, and people want to push toward avoiding pain in it, as John indicated. So I really do believe it's going to have a positive impact on the way we contract. Maybe not so much now, more to come, I suppose.
Sure. And in terms, I suppose, in other potential positive outcomes of this current climate is this kind of push towards kind of innovation and digitalization on site. I know that for many years now, the construction industry, as well as the full downstream industry, have really kind of tried to adapt how they work and kind of get on that train of digitalization. But for you, in your current work climate, how are you guys, or what innovation are you using to adapt to the current climate? And then we can go on to how that translates to the project work side of things. But for you guys, what has changed for you in terms of how you adopt innovation?
I'm not sure it's in a. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe. John, please.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, I mean, is probably a couple things. One, I think it probably highlights the need in the industry to increase our ability to modularize pieces of the plant, to be able to bring those into the plant in bigger pieces, which has been a trend in the industry for a number of years. And I just say overall, I think our industries, particularly at the contractor level, is that we're pretty slow to change. We're pretty slow to adopt technology improvements. And so for how many years did it take for us to get our workforces off of stick welding onto automatic welders? I mean, it's it just we get comfortable in the things that we do and the productivity that creates. We understand that productivity, and to move into something new for us can be a little scary. So I think these kind of events force us into making a shift. So the one example I would use is that as a company, we invested in, this is not an advertisement for Microsoft, but we invested in Microsoft Teams about 10 months ago. And I would say in general, we were not thrilled about spending the money. Well, thank God we did. So we took about 1,200 engineers and administrative staff in a week, moved everybody remote, working on. And frankly, we really didn't miss a lick, right? So, I mean, we just got up and running. And so we were forced into the situation of using this new communication and networking technology as an organization. And now we're so used, after 6 weeks, most humans form habits. So, we've got this new habit now where we're using this and we're having meetings on it. And so the implementation and the integration of this technology in our business is going to make a big shift in how we operate our company out into the future. I mean, it's actually, I'm glad I'm not in the commercial real estate business, because it's making us consider, do we really need a lot of these big fixed-based operation offices that we have? Can we start to minimize some of that real estate? Can we communicate better in real time? And so, so while that's not necessarily directly related to our project sites, but it is in the fact that our administrative teams that are there specifically to support our projects, to make sure they're successful are being able to do that in this environment from their homes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Greg, I know that
I couldn't agree more, John. 100% agree with what John said, and especially that last part. People who were reluctant to work from home because they needed the socialization that the workplace provided. Those who were what's the word? Not only reluctant, but maybe didn't feel confident working from home, have now been forced to do so. It's like throwing a kid in the swimming pool. Eventually, he'll learn to swim, likely. And I think that's what this has done. It's been the shock of the cold water, which says you're going to work from home now and you're going to do it tomorrow, and here's how we're going to do. But I will tell you that I've heard exactly what John has said. The improved efficiency, the effectiveness of working from home. I'm sitting around here in a large office space, and there's myself and our event planner across the hall rattling around like a marble in a jar. And for 4 or 5 weeks, the entire staff has been remote, and we haven't missed a lick. We haven't missed a phone call. We haven't missed an event. In fact, we've added more events and more services. And so you have to ask, like John said, boy, the commercial real estate industry and all the building that was, they were all hell bent to get up here prior to this pandemic. I think it's got a lot of people scratching their heads, and a lot of us with our eyes wide open and our mouths gaping, thinking, wow, we didn't know that would work so well. Are there glitches? Of course. But I think you're going to see the new technologies, whether it's GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams, Zoom. I think you're going to see new products developed for that new reality. And frankly, there's going to be a little bit of a shift. Now, how far that goes, I don't know. For how long it lasts, it's your guess. But it's working. It's working more than it's not working, overwhelmingly so.
Yeah, and do you think that could almost kind of translate into remote and automated project operations? Do you see it going that far?
Absolutely. We're already doing things with drones. We're already trending toward in a fairly decent pace modularization and pre-assembly. I think this is going to accelerate the development of technologies to manage a project remotely. The money's, I think, is going to be there to support it. I think the need is going to be there. The one gap it does leave, however, is that human interaction. I bet John's in his office. I'm certainly in my office, and you just do miss the human interaction, the creativity, the focus, the esprit de corps, the can-do culture. Those things are a little bit more challenging to create on an online format or remote working from wherever format. But it's not entirely new, and yet to be seen how we'll adapt to that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been doing to sort of deal with that, and Greg brings up a great point, is because we are humans and we do like to interact with each other. We've created on our communication tool, we've created a water cooler talk, and so someone every morning starts with a topic that goes out to all of our employees that are on this tool with some kind of a topic, and it could be something as simple as like this morning's is, what would you, if you won the lottery, what would you do? And so you get a lot of interesting commentary from people throughout the day that, the things they would do. And so there are ways to try and maintain that connection. But Greg's absolutely right. I mean, you can't underrate the human interaction and the positive mental health that brings.
Boy, those are two good points, and I think the third one is the creativity. A lot of us, I don't know how John rolls, but I've often told our crowd here, the same hot water that hardens the egg softens a carrot. There's different properties, different personalities, different characteristics we have, and one size doesn't fit all, and one environmental reality doesn't have the same impact on everybody. One of the things that I would be concerned with is, when you get into a room, with a cup of coffee or after hours, and you're chilling, and the creativity that emerges from the what if conversations, that's going to be a little bit trickier, I think. And we are in desperate need of an industry for some creative breakthrough, and I guess we'll have to figure that one out.
Sure, and I'm seeing a lot of questions regarding this impact. on kind of the craft time on tools and how that affects, I suppose, the supply chain in terms of labor and the people that actually work in the industry. Do you guys care to kind of discuss that a bit and the potential impacts and how we could maybe deal with it?
John, you want to take a swing at that pitch? You're probably best suited to answer that.
I think the one of the keys to our our success on our projects are the projects that are better planned, better thought out both in a initial and a real-time basis, have better safety performance, better schedule outcomes, better cost outcomes. And so when you add an event like this into a project situation, because it's become to some extent a life or death situation more than normal, safety, concern about safety injuries, it's put a hyper focus on planning and execution about how important that is. Mm-hmm. And so that goes down to, time on tools. And so you put, with this whole social distancing thing, people are paying more attention to that. So now you've changed the dynamics on line of fire incidents, right? So people aren't necessarily standing right next to their coworker where they could be injured in a line of fire incident. They because of the protocols, have to stand back a little further, and they're working a little bit more of a distance from each other. And then the tools themselves, when they're going back into the shop or into the tool trailer, there's hygiene issues now with those tools. So it's more attention from the tool people on the cleanliness and the quality of the tools that people are using. So I just think again it creates some new habits, and some of those new habits are going to stick, and it's going to be it's going to be good for our industry.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. He's exactly right on those points. Great points, John.
Sure, and we've been talking a lot about the kind of labor side of the supply chain, but something from our research that we have been kind of hearing a lot of what people want to know about is, what are the impacts that you're seeing on the inbound supply chain to projects? The world's kind of momentarily locked down, and therefore supply chains are kind of being disrupted. So perhaps I'd go to you, John, first in terms of understanding what are the impacts that you're seeing on your inbound supply chain and kind of raw materials and modularization management.
So most of our impacts that we've seen have largely been around PPE. So hand sanitizer, face masks, gaiters, the things that we need to deal with the sort of the CDC guidelines to keep our employees healthy and safe. Those have been the areas that have been most stressful from a supply chain. We've had a couple of hiccups for some specialized metal plate that we've had to deal with, but in general, we've been pretty fortunate. We've been able to maintain the supply chain and the things that we need for our projects. Now a lot of the things where our supply chains is really around small tools and expendables and those kinds of things, and so just not a different percentage of our projects are buying engineered equipment. And while we do that, I think we've been fortunate. A lot of our projects were in a situation from a timing perspective where a lot of those things were either en route or in manufacturing, and so we haven't had a lot of issues around that. But so for us to date, it's been kind of the PPE stuff around health and a little bit on specialized metallurgical plate.
For the owner part of the thing, Bridget, I think that some increased attention is being given to how do you rapidly demobilize a project? What's the rapid shutdown process? And then, hopefully next week or mid next month, what are the rapid mobilization challenges, and what do those do to the supply chain? Once you've cut that off or invoke some sort of contractual language and stop that supply chain, how do we assure that when it's time to rapidly mobilize a project, ramp it up, that those are still intact and still in good order? I think those are two of the pinch points that the owners are somewhat concerned about is the impact of rapid demobilization. How do you do it effectively? And rapid mobilization when we're ready to get going again. It's just not an easy stop and start. So I think that has contractual implications. It certainly goes to business relationships. We've been talking throughout the last 45 minutes on the importance of communication. All that, I think, feeds into that. But we're going to be studying, effective checklists for rapid demobilization of projects, rapid mobilization of projects, and their impact on the supply chain. More to come.
Sure. And in terms of, reducing the impacts of that, I know that you kind of touched a bit on it there, Greg, but, John, what are you guys doing to reduce the impact of this kind of delayed supply chain?
So we've been pretty fortunate. We've been able to, find, our procurement teams, we've got a pretty wide network. And so on the PPE stuff, I mean, we're doing a lot of sharing among projects and where the need is, and so we've done a pretty good job of being able to plug those holes where we need to. On the plate work issue, we've worked with our clients on some of those schedule impacts, but we've in general been able to resolve those with minimal impact to those projects. So it's, I'd have to say of all the impacts that we've had, the technical supply chain, not the PPE supply chain, we've been fortunate it has not been that extreme.
Another point that I bring up too is the labor impact. Just 2 months ago, perhaps 3, we were in the hottest economy in the history of the planet, in the history of the world. And so fundamentally, a lot of those fundamentals will prevail. They've been shaken, and there will be a little mix up. But I think the worker shortage, interestingly enough, why we think and there have been, unfortunately, these mass layoffs, and obviously skilled trades have been impacted. But I still think we could see some worker shortage and worker training challenges as we emerge from this. I think the heavy and highway and the civil works is going to get an infusion of cash. They're going to be going. Obviously, projects which were from pharma or consumer non-durables or automotive, which were quickly shut down, are going to be restarted. So I don't think it's been the solution to the workforce shortage issue at all. I'm not convinced that's gone away as a result of this. Now, we may see a little lull in the action where it's easy to put the skilled trades where they're needed, but fundamentally that challenge was there, and I believe that it'll return to us even this year. Yeah, John, Greg, do you have any thought on that, the labor issue?
I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, the labor shortage issue is a real problem for our industry. Yes. I think we've done a pretty good job dancing through the economic growth here over the past few years of dealing with that. But, you just envision which is probably because of the pandemic and because of the federal government's desire to amp up the economy, they may actually get a federal infrastructure bill done, and they're going to invest heavily in highways and roads and airports and hospitals, and that's going to have a huge demand on labor. And so I think we're an indirect or direct outcome of this pandemic is going to be more demand for skilled labor, and that's going to create a whole new range of issues, I think, for our industry.
And I think by and large, it's counterintuitive. With 26 million people unemployed and a lot of those tradespeople, the assumption is that there is a little bit of a reprieve from that. But our feeling is, John's absolutely right. And this labor shortage thing has not gone away. The need for skilled trades has not gone away. It will reemerge. It'll come back hot. It won't come back evenly around the world, or certainly throughout the states. But it's still there. That's still there. And so that's again counterintuitive to most of your listeners, but something we need to pursue.
Yeah, definitely. We've had a few questions regarding the kind of demands of future workforce, and we've had a few questions regarding how do you train young engineers to be able to work with the construction environment of the future. And another question is regarding what can community colleges do to help the industry adjust to all the changes and new challenges, regarding this kind of younger workforce? What will the demands of then be, do you think, and what can the industry do to kind of continue to engage these young people and make sure that they're trained for the industry of tomorrow?
So a lot of the industry groups like Users Roundtable and the CII specifically, have next gen sub-organizations within their groups. And I know a lot of what we do, and a lot of our peer companies try to bring in young engineers or young college professionals, whether they're in a engineering or technical field, or they might be in a construction management field, or even in finance and accounting, and we bring them into our organization and kind of mentor them through a couple of years, get them in office environments and out into our projects to kind of get them embedded into the organization and where we're going. As I like to say, our industry is not necessarily the sexiest industry to want to go to for a young engineer, right? So they want to go into some high tech field, or maybe today into bioengineering or pharma or something else. So we're a very attractive industry where we are provide great work and career opportunities, good income. And I think one of the things we got to do is kind of get past the stigma of the construction industry is not a good place for someone to form a career at. It's a great place to put a career together. And so I think we've got to do a better job as an industry reaching into the high schools and into the colleges and telling our story. And that our industry is a great place to have a career. It can be very rewarding, and both from a financial standpoint, but from a career and a mental standpoint.
Yeah, I think, Bridget, that there's a two-prong approach. When you talk about kiddos coming out of the universities, as you mentioned, I'm an adjunct prof at the University of Cincinnati College of Engineering, about 8,500 people in 7 different schools, so it's not huge, but a nice medium-sized school. And those folks are more technologically adept, more creative, and more willing to risk and try new approaches than the folks of my and John's demographic would be. And so I think we're going to be delightfully surprised at how they approach this industry with the resources and the natural propensities that they have to use and implement technology. The second thing is I think you're going to see data analysis and data gathering as an integral part of what the colleges and universities at least offer the professional side. I'm talking CMs, architectural engineers, CEs, etc. The gathering and the use of data. And by the way, I think, as a little side note, I think that's going to be another big part of construction is data centers. We're already seeing it with Google, who's a part of CURD, Intel, Microsoft. I think is on our front door. But the need for and the effective use of extensive data gathering for better decision making. But as far as the willingness to collaborate, the willingness to use technologies, their propensities to implement and to get creative with them, I think it's going to be pretty darn solid on the professional side. John did mention, and he's right, we've got an image issue on the craft side. And, here's the thing. This is truly, and I'm going to speak as an American, I know you have a global audience, but this is truly the last American dream industry, where you can go in as a craft worker, earn while you learn in some trade, start your organization, morph up to commercial, even into industrial. I've watched it happen. Even here in greater Cincinnati, Ohio, and Kentucky and Indiana, these men and women who started in the trades and after a generation or so have really built a solid, viable business. It truly is the last American dream industry. And I think that we don't do a good enough job to promote that among the high schoolers, as John said, or those who choose alternative careers to college. If we can get that word out there and help them understand and create the vision, I think that you'll see young students attracted to our business if we continue to be innovative with technology and the use of data and all the cool stuff like BIM and Lean and IPD and modularization and the use of drones and robotics. We've got a lot to offer. We shouldn't short sell ourselves. We just got to do a better job of marketing it.
Fab. No, we're running to the end of our webinar, but I have two good questions I think that I would love to ask you guys. So first, actually, is have you seen difficulties in making claims from construction insurance? What sort of insurance may we need to obtain kind of future works addressing disease and pandemic risks? What are the lessons that can be learned?
I'll take that one initially, and the today answer is I'm not so sure. The tomorrow answer, we have both Zurich and Aon as a part of our organization, and we had the president of Aon and one of his key partners on a webinar a couple of weeks ago talking about what kind of seismic shifts in insurance has this pandemic brought about, and I think the need to do a more effective risk analysis for the insureds on behalf of the insurance company is going to be huge. We've got a risk portal that Kurt's getting ready to launch that it's not a cure-all, but it is a tool to help assess risk in the industry. And if you want more information for your listeners, curt.org, CURT.org, you can probably find some emerging information there as well. But right now, I don't know. John, what's your crystal ball look like on point?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Greg. I'm not sure, we totally know. I can tell you that, what we're seeing out in the insurance markets today is a increase in insurance premiums and the desire for increased deductibles, and that's unrelated to this pandemic issue. It's more related to some big claims that's hit the industry overall. And so with all due respect to any insurance people that are on the phone, but insurance companies are in business to not pay claims. So, and if they have to pay, they gotta go, raise the rates to be able to additionally provide that security. So I'm not sure we know yet. I agree with you, Greg. I think, but I think the expectation is it's going to be, we can expect, more exclusion and higher rates.
Right. Here's the other thing too. I think we're in an industry, and John, I'm sure that you've talked to Stephen Mulva about this, but it is widely accepted that we're overinsured as an industry. And we're spending a lot of delta, a lot of wasted dollars on insurance that we really don't need. Some of your listeners may or may not be aware of something called Operating System 2.0. It was Stephen Mulva at CII's vision. Kurt has become a kissing cousin and a key partner with them on the pursuit of it. And one of the key items that OS2, Operating System 2.0, what's next after next, is going to begin to address is the overinsurance issue. So the good news is we're aware. The good news is we're working together. The good news is the insurance organizations are collaborating with our organizations to come to a fair risk allocation and insurance solution. More to come.
Sure. And the last question of today's webinar. So pending companies' point of view on the future of the oil market, or oil and gas market, should I say, and in conjunction with COVID, would you advise owners to revisit their portfolio of projects to reevaluate the ROI to ensure projects can still meet objectives and desired returns?
John, you're in the oil and gas space. You care to swing at that one?
Yeah,
everybody's listening, John.
Another crystal ball question, yeah.
You better get it right, John. Everybody's listening.
Yeah, you can advise our clients to not look at their ROIs and contract with us to do some work. So if I had that answer. Go ahead, Greg.
No. Here's the thing. I think Bridget and John, I think you'll agree, is at any one time on anybody's portfolio with any sector, it's going to look like a heart monitor, depending on what day that you happen to take a look. And I think we have to look at the long-term need for these vital industries, and that's not going to go away. And the need's not, is not going to diminish. Today, is it? Of course. I paid $1.25 for gas last weekend, and I was pissed off that it went up to $1.50 today. Are you kidding me? I mean, we would have just relished and taken a $2.50 just a few short months ago. So I think we got to take a long-term view of where we're going. I want to encourage your listeners to understand that certainly in the United States we had a red-hot economy. Outlooks were great. Stocks are still, and I don't know what they're doing today. I haven't checked them, but I'm shocked that they're not 10,000 points below where they usually were trending yesterday. But I think fundamentally we've got a solid industry. Are we going to see a U-shape or a V-shape recovery? I think it's mixed, but we're resilient people, and this is a resilient industry. We'll get through, and I want us to be encouraged as we emerge from this that the best days are just ahead. John?
Yeah, I think it's kind of short-term pain, long-term gain kind of thing.
Right.
I got a friend of mine who's the CEO of a fairly sizable midstream company, and whenever I have this discussions with him about where he sees the oil markets going, he says to me, John, he goes, we're making decisions for 5 to 10 years from now. I care about what the price of oil and refined products are going to be 10 years from now, not next 6 months. And so I think the companies that are in that mode, that are thinking long term where the energy markets are going, are the ones that will continue to invest and continue to provide opportunities for our industry. We're looking at this as an opportunity as a company to find ways that we can be more efficient, find ways that we can continue to drive competitive energy within our business, and where when we come out of this, where are the opportunities for us to grow our business, to take on new regions, market share, and to continue to drive growth for Matrix Service Company. That's our focus. We want to continue to grow the business. We think the energy markets we're in create that opportunity for growth within our company. And so picking the right clients, picking the right geographies, picking the right areas of the energy market for us to work are what's important.
Great. Well, on that note, that I think that takes us quite nicely to the end of the webinar. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you guys, our amazing panelists. I know the time and effort that you guys put into this, and we really appreciate you partnering with us on this, and also to the listeners. Also, I'm sure that the listeners and I will agree that some great insight was shared there and much food for thought. Also, I'd like to thank the listeners. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. To reiterate what was said at the beginning of the webinar, we will be sending out the recordings of today in the next kind of coming week. And just a quick reminder that this webinar was brought to you in connection with Downstream Virtual 2020. So Greg mentioned that a lot of their events are going virtual. Well, so is Downstream 2020, and it's completely free to attend. So be sure to check out our website. It's being held on the 9th to 11th of June, and it's going live and on demand, and you'll be hearing folks like these kind of presenting the latest research and development and kind of case studies to keep your plant on track throughout its full cycle. So we hope to see you there, and thanks everyone. Bye now, and hope you stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.